Hey everyone. I could tell you about Richard Mulholland's videos online that have seen over 2 million views. I could also tell you about his illustrious public speaking career, which has seen him address hundreds and thousands of people in over 40 countries across 6 continents. I could also tell you about his 4 books, Relentless Relevance, Here Be Dragons, Boredom Slayer, and Legicide. But what I'd really like to share with you today is the fact that in my 3 years of podcasting, this, I think, is the most authentic discussion that I've had to date. So much so that we ran 30 minutes over recording time, and to capture this, because I want you to get the essence of this discussion, I'm putting this episode out with 0 editing. That's right. This is raw, unfiltered conversation, as if you were sitting there in the room with us. So please join us today in our conversation as we discuss the true essence of purpose and potential, as well as embracing the duality of life's challenges and triumphs, amongst many, many other things. And do me a favor, if you like this episode, please share it, and all of Richard's details and access to his fantastic content that he's putting out there is in the show notes below. Afterwards, so I'm happy if we just keep it conversational.
Yeah, cool, perfect.
So you, how was London? First of all, you were there last week.
Yeah, it was really nice. I did an event there, which was cool. It was really good. It was a back on the horse event. The last time I spoke in London, there was like people offended, and it was a very, very young, creative group, and I think they just didn't like that I exist. And I struggled a bit, and so I you lose your mojo, and I started thinking like, London's not for me. It's too young and cosmopolitan. And so when I presented last week and it went really well, I was stoked. You realize, no, it's just certain audiences. And then I did a podcast recording with a guy called Ezra Chapman that was a real highlight. It was pretty awesome.
Really, eh? And what is his show?
It's called Curious with Ezra Chapman.
Okay.
And he's got a really lovely setup in London. And you go in there, they book 3 hours with you. And let me actually stop kneeling on this so it's not bobbing around. And they book 3 hours with you. The first half hour is just you and him chatting. And then you move to the table, and we just carried on chatting. And we ended up basically doing what we're doing now, is the podcast that actually started. And it got deep in a conversation. We're probably an hour in before we got to where we thought we would get.
Yeah, that's crazy. Joe Rogan does that. I've seen that a lot with his shows. I listened to a recent one with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. And they're literally talking like as they're walking into studio, sitting down, miking up, getting headphones on. And every single time it's like that, which is quite cool. It's organic, and you feel like you're just like a fly on the wall, just being privy to that conversation, which is quite cool. I really like those approaches.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. Okay, cool, man. Well, let's get started. Rich, first of all, you put a lot of content out there, and I myself am a curious mind. I have a podcast myself. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and my rule of thumb for who gets my attention is when I listen to their stuff, does it make my life better? And I can firmly say that when I listen to the stuff that you put out there on LinkedIn and on YouTube and the podcasts that you've been on, when I think about what you say and when I try and apply to my life the things that you talk about, I definitely find that my life gets better, which is a really cool thing. And it's really cool to have you on the show, man. And just first of all, I want to say thank you, because sometimes it's not easy putting all that stuff out there. It's a lot of work, and I just want to let you know that it's helped me. So thanks.
That is incredible feedback. Thank you. It's really, really nice to hear. And I want to say something cheesy like that's why you do it, but it's not cheesy because it's the truth, right? Like, you realize you're not going to resonate with everybody, but every now and then you meet somebody that something lands with, and not everything has to land. And it just feels amazing. And it just reminds me, it fills my tank for the next one. So thank you.
Yeah.
And it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks, man. Let's talk about purpose, Rich. That was one of the things that really struck me. And apart from couple of parts which I sent to you in an email actually made me quite laugh quite a bit because of the way that you put it. But you've got maybe a contrarian thought to purpose. Can you elaborate on that? It's the new year, so people are no doubt filled with purpose at the moment.
Yeah, okay. So one of the core challenges I have is that I think we should have purpose. I don't think we should have a purpose. I think we should live purposeful lives, as in we should live lives where we're trying to achieve certain thing, where it feels like we're working on something. Right? The moment we stop working on something or feeling useful, I think it's problematic. The idea that we if you look at a company, my company has a purpose. It was a vehicle created to solve a specific problem in the world, and that can evolve. And I think it must evolve. A lot of people, though, they make their purpose very tied into what they, or I think we've been oversold the idea of purpose. I think purpose is a luxury. I think the idea that your work should be this deep, meaningful purpose. There are forklift drivers driving around in Amazon warehouses to try and tell them to find purpose. Sure, if they want to, yes, we're helping people get it, but they're not going home at night thinking like, oh, I helped somebody get a parcel that they liked or a gift. They're going home and their purpose is probably, to put food on the table for their family, to be good parents or whatever, things like that. And I think we've been oversold this idea that we must have a purpose. In fact, I think it's an arrogance. It presupposes that we were created for a reason. And the real problem I have with this is it puts an incredible amount of pressure on us. And for me, my purpose, if I was to give you one, I have a purpose statement. I want to live a fun life while empowering and provoking people to make their mark. And I do want to try and work towards that. But my purpose is really to be a really, really good person to the people around me. And I feel like we've got to a stage in the world where that isn't enough. And I think that's what leads to huge amounts of anxiety and stress and depression, is because we've been oversold this idea that we must have these big, meaningful purposes. But for some reason, being a good parent or child or sibling or friend, that's not enough anymore. And I don't understand it. I think it's deeply flawed.
Yeah. Do you think social media has accelerated that misguided notion of having a purpose?
I think it's definitely, social media just accelerates everything, right? So I think it's the messaging. And I think it's that people don't interrogate ideas. They don't stop to think about it. If it sounds nice, they go with it. It's like another one that I really dislike is empathy. It seems cool. Like the idea that we shouldn't be empathetic seems like, why would you say that? You must be a shit person. But actually, when you scrape at the surface of it, it doesn't feel like a good idea for me a lot of the time. And social media just look. Here's the thing, Clinton. For me, some people want to form ideas, and some people want to accept ideas. There are idea hunters and idea farmers, and the social media has given the idea farmers a much easier job of what to accept. Because if something sounds nice, it just spreads really, really well. And then people just accept it without giving it much thought. And then they have to live in a world in which they own that as a worldview, and that can be really difficult.
Yeah. Look, that makes perfect sense to me. That makes absolutely perfect sense to me. Something that struck me as well, the next P is potential. And the reason why I'm bringing these two up is because these are the ones that have personally resonated with me in my consumption of your content. And first of all, the purpose I found exactly was such a weight off the shoulders, because I found that I was sort of burdened by that somewhat. And sometimes you only realize it after the fact that you've let go, strangely, that how much of a burden you actually were carrying. And the second thing is potential. And so can you speak to me a bit about potential and maybe your views and philosophies around that word?
Yeah. If I can go a little bit long form in this, I want to give you the backstory to my realization of this. Yeah. So I'm in an organization called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, wonderful place. And every year they accept certain people to go to their Global Leadership Academy. It's like 24 people, Washington, D.C. And it really was one of the most life-changing events of my life. Like I was a different person when I came out 5 days later than I was when I went in, categorically. And on the fifth day, there's a gentleman by the name of Warren Rustand. He curates the program. He is just one of the most wonderful, incredible, wise, thoughtful humans. He's everybody's dream mentor. If you imagine a picture of your dream mentor, it's Warren. And Warren guides you on this journey. And at the end of it, you walk into this room and there's a circle of chairs. And between every two chairs, after every two chairs, there's a box of tissues. So you know shit's about to get real because like, why are there tissues everywhere? So we're sitting down and Warren does this little talk with us about potential. And he gets to a line, and the line is kind of his most famous one. And I always feel bad saying this because I just so fundamentally disagree with him in this line on reflection, but it sounds so wonderful. And there's a point where we're sitting there and we kind of took you through everything, all your successes, everything in your life, and you list it. And then he drops this bomb and he says, one's success is only important when measured against one's potential. So, and then you're sitting there and then they say, go out for a bit of a walk and process this. And I started working myself up so much because I'd started to really focus on my life, my family, my personal development, things like this. But actually, I started thinking that maybe, and by the way, I don't think he's wrong. I got to a certain age, getting better felt harder. So telling people that I was happy where I was, felt very easy. It felt like a cheat code. Oh, no, but I'm happy. I don't need to do more. I don't need to achieve more. And so, but I realized that I was lying to myself, that actually I kind of wanted more. I knew I had more potential, but I was scared to go and get it in case I failed. So I come back into the room, we're sitting down and people start speaking, it gets to me and I start trying to speak and I just break down. I'm bawling, but like horrible bawling. I couldn't keep it together. And the more we argued crying and the more people hugged me, and I basically said, I've been a liar and I've been lying about how comfortable I am and blah, 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 blah. And the more people hugged me, the more I cry, even later on, like after I finished. And I went to other people in the room. You know those moments when you're like, there's a silence in the room and you just hear this one guy like, I actually, wobbling. Yeah, the chin's wobbling. Yeah. And my wife always says that I have the emotions of a brick. Like I find it really difficult to cry. And so everything came out. Oh, wow. And I've reflected on this a lot. And I thought that I really do feel like a failure when measured against my potential. And I don't think he's wrong. And it was a kick in the shorts because I do need to work a bit harder. And I was, what's that? 8 years ago, I would have been 43. Like I absolutely should not be tapping out then. I should be still working hard at it. However, on reflection, in the years that have followed, I think it's a very damaging statement. In fact, I went back to Warren. I visited him in Utah, and I said, I think there's almost an act of aggression there, and it's not meant. And here's my theory on it: nobody, no matter how well you do in your life, you will never feel that you have fulfilled your potential. In fact, the thing with potential is that the better, whatever you achieve, whatever you do that is brilliant, all it does is it opens up a new horizon for potential. So you peak one mountain, you realize, wow, if I could do that, if I could run 10Ks, then 20Ks feels possible. If I could run 20Ks, then the comrades feels possible. If I could run the comrades and one of these ultra marathons overnight feel possible. And basically your potential is always further than where you are. So if your success is only important when measured against your potential, you will die a failure because you'll feel like, well, there was so much more I could have done. And I think a far better idea, a far better model to think about it, if I borrow from Warren, is your success is only important when measured against your intent. Because it's our intent that dictates, if I say that I'm going to quit smoking and I don't, well, then I failed in something that I plan to do. If I say I'm going to lose weight and I don't, then I failed. But if I say I'm going to lose 5 kilograms, even if I potentially could have lost 10 to get a six-pack, if I lose the 5, then I've won. I've achieved my level of victory. Now, I don't think we should ignore potential completely, but I don't think it should be the yardstick by which we measure a success or failure on. I think our potential should be a tool that we use to determine our intent. And then once we get there, we should recognize that, okay, well done, we're here. And then we can decide to go further or not. And I'll give you one last case study in this, and maybe this will make sense. It's much simpler. But every year I set myself a kind of challenge for something physical that I want to do. At the moment, it's related to jiu-jitsu, but a few years ago, it was to do 25 pull-ups in a row. I wanted to be able to do 25 pull-ups in a row. I thought that was really, really cool. Another one, I think 2 years before that, or 2 years, a year before that, was to do 100 double unders consecutively. And when I got the 25 pull-ups, and I said, like, I did it on my birthday, I filmed it, I sent it to my team, they all knew I was doing it. And when I got there, somebody turned around and said to me, so what's next? 30 or 35? And for me, it was like, no, of course not. That's done now. I'm very, 25 was my enough. Yeah. And when they said 100 double unders, then I was like, no, I'm done with double unders. That's enough. I would really like to do 3 muscle ups. That's one I would like to get to one day, but I'm scared to commit to it. But the idea that what most people do is they get to 100 or 25 pull-ups, then they think they must do 30. But because I defined my enough earlier, because I set my intent at 25, pull-ups is not a sport of mine. It's not a recreational obsession. It's just a challenge that I wanted to see I could do at Misogi. So I think understanding that, setting your intent and then allowing yourself to tap out once you achieve it is great. But of course, when you're at 25 pull-ups, 30, you have the potential for 30. I'm just not sure it has to be interesting. So sorry, that was a very long monologue.
No, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. So in summary, if you measure yourself against your potential, you're guaranteed to die a failure. That sounds, I mean, that's quite profound, actually, when you think about it. And
right, if you measure yourself on your intent, you can win many times.
Yeah. And I suppose the key then is like exactly defining the rules of the game. So what is enough? What is enough with respect to fitness? I've got a gym. That's what I do outside of the podcast. So I fully subscribe to the muscle ups and being hell of a challenge. So if you can do that, I'll be bloody impressed, man.
Can't even do one.
Yeah, well, neither can I. I think if I try and do one, 2 of my rotator cuffs will shoot out that way, and the other 2 would be splattered up against the mirror back there. So yeah, I fully subscribe to that. And that's cool, man. But you've defined the rules of the game, which I think is the big thing. And a lot of people, and myself included, are guilty of not defining the rules of the game. It's just this endless pursuit of sometimes we don't even know what. And
can I push back slightly?
Yeah.
Because it's not the rules I defined, it's the end game. All I defined is the victory condition. And I think this is important because most of us, we live according to rules with no preset victory condition. And when we run strategy work with companies, we really go deep on this. Strategy is a kind of rules of how you operate, but a strategic destination ignores the rules of operation and just says, get here anywhere you can. And to me, that's a much more interesting proposition. So what I've done is I've defined the winning state, the state under which the game can end. And Simon Sinek talks a lot about, say, the infinite game in life and in business. And it's James Carse's theory. And I challenge that slightly. I think yes, and I challenge it. I don't disagree with it. Yeah. Sure, life is an infinite game, but how uninteresting. What makes life interesting is many, many finite games we play along the way. And so I would rather measure up my success than playing many small games, achieving victory, and then playing a new game than the idea of this infinite, because potential and infinite game are almost related. And so for me, it's defining the victory condition of the game more than the rules.
So defining the victory condition of the game would in essence be the antidote to the curse of potential. Would that be a fair statement?
So. I think that's a very fair statement. I think it's a great statement. Yes, because use your potential to define a good victory condition. It should be a stretch. We should stretch ourselves. And I think that's what Warren means. And that's what his intent was, is don't quit, stretch yourself. There's more you can give. You're young, you can do more. And I think he's right. And I think it is a really good push in the right direction. But that's not the determination of your success. That is the determination of what success could be. So we use our potential to define the victory condition, and we use our victory condition to allow ourselves to leave the game.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I heard once Naval Ravikant. Do you know Naval?
Brilliant, yeah.
He was, unbelievable, man. I love that guy.
He's the guy. He's one of those humans that just makes you feel stupid because he's so wise and so good. And he made me realize the difference in wisdom and intelligence. He operates from a place of wisdom that I think is so smart.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, you were
And
saying
yeah,
about
yeah,
number.
yeah, yeah. And so they were talking, him and Chris Williamson were talking about um, basically about working hard and sacrificing and realizing that money and fame and fortune is actually not what's required to make you happy. But we know that, but we only know that from the people who've made it and have got to that point of having all the money and the fame to then realize actually we could have been happy without that, and that's not necessarily a guarantee. And the way that he said it is, the way to rid yourself of the game or to free yourself of the game is to win at the game. And I thought that was just such a good way of saying it, because he was like, the only way that you'll become free of the game is if you win at the game and then realize that, okay, it's actually not all about that. You could, of course, go the long way around and do all this personal work and realize that it's not about the fame and the fortune. But he says, arguably, the shortest route is to win at the game and then to be free of the game, which I thought was just such a fascinating way of looking at things.
Yeah, I need to watch that. I've obviously read the almanac and watched the original big long form interview. I need to watch the Williamson one. I think it'll be great. And to me, what you're saying there is very, very similar to this victory condition idea, because in order to escape the game and win the game, you need to define the game and define what the parameters are. And the one thing I will say, so I think it's relatively easy, but I do think there is a correlation with money and happiness, but it's not as linear as we think it is. It's not the more money I have, the happier I become. In fact, what it is because I've often debated this. Again, this is probably a controversial statement, but when I lived in South Africa, my housekeeper was Rachel. She was wonderful. She was amazing. Now we paid Rachel really well for a housekeeper salary, and she had a great life, and we really tried to do as much for her as we could. She had her own home in where she came from, and she had a small little home in Cape Town. And I've often thought, when chatting to Rachel, that I actually think potentially she's happier than I am, or she's certainly more content than I am. And the reason for this, and so I've kind of analyzed this a lot and thought about it. And what Rachel is, imagine there are different curves in life, right? Because if you looked at the difference between me and Rachel is small compared to the difference between Bill Gates and me in wealth, right? So Bill Gates is 20 times wealthier than me. I might be a few times wealthier than Rachel. Or he's 1,000 times wealthier than me, I should say. And I might be 20 times wealthier than Rachel. And what the difference is Bill Gates would look at us and think, well, we must be sad. But of course we're not, or not always. And I think the trick is getting to the top of your bracket and staying there. So if you think about it in football leagues, and I know we always want to get promoted, but the moment you get promoted from one football league to the next football league, and then you're at the bottom there, it's hard not to feel like a failure because your yardstick is on people ahead of you of the league. Now, in sport, that makes sense, but in life, it doesn't. In life, what we should do is to figure out which socioeconomic space do we want to play in. And then what we should do, victory is getting into the top echelon of that socioeconomic space. The mistake most of us make when we get there is we look at potential. We say, okay, well, we should jump to the next one. So we've got the nicest house in our housing estate in, wherever it happens to be in Four Ways. But then we get there and then we think, well, what we need to do is buy a small apartment in Sandton. And when you have that small apartment in Sandton, you feel like a failure because everybody around you is wealthier, they have better cars. Whereas if you'd stayed in Four Ways and just leveled up other parts of your life, then you're king of the hill. And so I think that's what he means. And it also allows you to be post-economic. So when you define your financial enough, then you realize, okay, well, if I get here, then I have enough. Anything beyond that level is post-economic. So at that point, you have all the freedom in your life because everything you do, you can choose. Now, I was relatively post-economic in South Africa. We chose to move to the Isle of Man. And now, for the first time in decades, I've gone into debt again to buy a property and things like this. And so now I feel like I've climbed down the ladder again. But, be that as it may, with those reasons for that. But I think that's what's important is you can't leave the game unless you A, recognize you're in it, and B, see it as finite. If you see it as infinite, then you always want to make more. And just the one problem I have with money is in the Olympic Games of being rich, you'll always be a loser.
Yeah.
None of us, no matter how well we do, is ever going to win the gold medal or a medal or even make the kind of national team in being rich. So it's such a shitty yardstick for success.
Yeah. So that reminds me of, you put me onto this guy here, the Year Compass.
Yeah, I do it every year.
Yeah, I saw this on your LinkedIn, and then I went and did it this year, and I found it so useful that I printed out a whole bunch of copies and I left it on my table at the gym, and I handed it out to my clients, and I said, "Yeah, take this.
Wow.
It's not for you to report back to me. This is a personal thing. Sit down, reflect. If you find it useful, then kudos to you. I hope you do." And what I found to be, first of all, when you reflect on 2025, I don't know about you, but I was drained after I did that. Like, it's if you invest in it, it's fucking draining. And they even say in the middle, they're like, okay, take a break after 2025 and come to 2026 the next day or whenever, the next couple days. And what was so interesting to me was the things that I was most proud of reflecting on 2025 is also the things that have brought me the most stress. So you moving to the Isle of Man reminded me. So I bought my first house in June of last year. And
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, man. And that was something that I was incredibly proud of. And we've got a young family, so we're growing into something that was bigger than ourselves and to provide for our son. But that was something that, well, for sure, I'm the most proud of. But it was also the thing that is bringing me the most stress. and I just found that that's such an interesting duality of life, because often these things they're intertwined. It's like yin and yang, order and chaos. Does that something that resonates with you?
Yeah, in a massive way. On my laptop is a sticker that says "Do hard things," and all success comes out of that's why I challenge myself once a year. There's a guy called Justin King. I don't know if you follow Justin on LinkedIn. South African Kiptonian dude, really cool guy. Fitness fanatic. I think you guys should definitely connect. I'll actually connect you afterwards. And his whole thing is smart toughness. He believes that we need to do something tough. We need to be doing meaningful challenges. And because growth comes out of adversity. I mean, it's again, it sounds cliched, but it's so true. I think one of the biggest challenges that why we're hearing for so much depression and mental health issues in the youth today and young adults is because as parents, we vaccinated them from the hard stuff. We felt that our need was to give them a very innocent upbringing and try and protect them from that life was hard enough. But actually, this would be like stopping your children from getting any antibodies and then sending them out into the world. And they're going to get a whole lot sicker, a whole lot quicker. What we need to do is let our children grow up realizing that life is not easy nor fair. And when they understand that, when they get into the real world and it's not easy and it's not fair, they don't think that they're fucking it up. They recognize that, okay, well, everything is normal. And I know I can deal with it because I've been through it. Yeah. So we have to train our children instead of giving our kids the innocence and softness. And it's not to say that we can't, of course we must protect them. I'm not saying, send them to work in a factory at 7, but we really, really should be forcing them to do hard things and to realize that life is not fair. And this is that problem with these participation awards and everybody's a winner mentality. It's just a really, really bad thing because life doesn't work like that. So we're ineffectively training people for life.
Yeah. So one of my things, I think a lot about these types of things, and having your first child is something that is, it's the most profound thing ever. And to be honest, it's something that is so inexplicable that there's only a before and an after. There's only before you had a child and then after you had a child. That's like the marker. And it's just the most incredible thing. And one of the things that I've always told myself as a father is to make sure that Grayson can visibly see me voluntarily undertaking difficult shit and have that as an example for him. So, and one of the best ways you can do that is fitness. So I don't know, swim the mid-mile, run the comrades, do 25 pull-ups, take your pick. You can apply that to business and that sort of thing as well. But set an example to voluntarily undertake difficult things, to immunize yourself against the times when you get difficult things come your path, but involuntarily. So, yeah.
The beautiful thing about what you said there about voluntary difficult things is that the stakes are lower. So if the mid-mile doesn't go as well as you hoped it would go, well, train harder, do it again next year. Barring, of course, bad things can happen. Two guys died in that recent Ironman in the swim, which was pretty gnarly. But for the most part, the stakes generally feel lower, right? So I think that's a good thing. I think giving ourselves low stakes victory conditions to train ourselves to be tough is what we should be trying to do. And I don't think we do it enough. I think even a lot of people's hobbies are passive. They don't set themselves stretch goals or targets within their hobbies to go further. So I do jiu-jitsu 5 times a week. I've been off for 2 years, so I really feel like I have to catch up. And I've got very specific goals that I want to achieve by the end of this year in that. And I want it to be hard. I want it to be something that I've really got to work at. And although there's 2 reasons why I think this is important. One, an hour before I finish my workday, I've started finding myself wanting to get onto YouTube to watch videos of jiu-jitsu or something to practice. And then when I'm driving home, I'm already thinking about the evening's rule. Is there something I'm working on? Is there something I'm trying to achieve? What am I trying to do? And so I like the idea of instead of switching off, switching over. But you can't switch over unless it feels meaningful and it feels like you're trying to achieve something. So I think that's the one thing that makes it really good. And then the one other thing, a friend of mine's named an entrepreneur, a South African entrepreneur called Oren Klopper, and he's a brilliant guy. And he actually rewards his staff. So his staff's incentive model is not based on doing well at work. His staff incentive model is pushing yourself to do something hard outside of work. So your bonuses are defined by the hard things you do outside of work. Yes, and he talks about growing the dreams of the doers. But now he says here's the selfish reason for it, is he says people that achieve things outside of work can't slack at work. They just can't. If you're the kind of person that gets up every morning at 5 o'clock to go and train because you want to do the Ironman, you want to do the race, you don't come to work and be happy just sitting, messing around all day long. Your brain can't change its programming. So you come back, he said, every single time somebody climbs a mountain, they become my best employee. Every single time somebody does something great, they start leading their teams because you can't separate the 2 things. If you've told yourself and programmed your brain to be the type of person that works hard, does hard things to achieve good shit, then you don't separate that when you get to the office.
Yes. I love that. That's so interesting, man. I've never heard of that before. Flip. That's genius.
Yeah.
That
really it's very smart.
It's like behavioral economics.
He'd be a good guest to chat to at some stage. His views on business and what he's achieved are incredible. And he's just moved back to South Africa. There's many companies in New York.
Nice. Rich, a couple of things I've noticed you say on different podcasts, videos as well. The best is yet to come. And it was a line that another guest or another host rather asked you if there's one parting message that you can leave the listeners. You said the best is yet to come. So why do you think that that's something that's so pertinent to you, that you feel like you need to reinforce that, and you've reinforced it numerous times?
Clinton, how old are you?
I'm 36.
36. You're the all gold age. 30.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the best age ever. Okay, so I'm 51, and it's very, very hard. If I don't keep telling myself that the best is yet to come and act as if that is the case, it's very easy to believe that the best is behind me. Now, if you define your self-worth based on purpose and business purpose and things like this, the energy you have generally, most people, the energy they have in their 30s is greater than the energy they have in their 40s and 50s for work. And I don't want to accept that. My life would feel very unreal. The moment I start feeling like the best is behind me, is the moment that I feel like I'm on the downhill path. And so by not allowing myself that, and by recognizing that best can evolve, that I might not do more, but like best for me might be doing bigger speaking gigs for bigger, more significant companies and events around the world. And maybe that's different to what best was for me when I started Missing Link, when I was growing the company, but it certainly feels meaningful and relevant to what I care about now. And the truth of the matter is, I absolutely do believe it. I can't allow myself to imagine that the best could be behind me. You know, I've still got to hold my grandkids one day and get to move to the phase where I'm no longer collecting information, but I'm distilling it. Like there's so many reasons to believe that the best is ahead of me that I refuse to allow the notion that it's not any space to breathe. And here's my hope. Like I hope to hang on to that as long as humanly possible. Like the goal is to die. The goal is to die proving yourself wrong. You know, 1 minute before you die, you're saying the best is yet to come, and then you die. And then you're like, you actually win. Yeah.
That's hilarious. That's so funny. But that's, oh, man, I love that. That reminds me of a Jordan Peterson line I wrote down once. He said, the more you act out the proposition that life is good, the better it gets. And I thought that that's such an interesting way of looking at it. And then you start to piece it together. And you think to yourself, all the big decisions that you make are actually you taking quite an optimistic view on life. So, for example, entrepreneurship. I mean, if we've all heard the stats of the first 5 years, most businesses don't succeed, Now, if you had to just lay out the stats and you had to say to somebody, hey, you're going to do this thing, the chances of you succeeding are probably between 10 and 20%. You're going to have terrible cash flow. You won't be able to pay yourself a salary for so many years. You're going to have very stressed. You're going to be very stressed. It's going to impact, you're not going to be able to switch off. It's going to impact on your family life. But are you in? You'd be like, that doesn't sound like a great deal to me. But to take an optimistic view of the future would be to be, yeah, I'll roll the dice. And to buy a house is taking an optimistic view of the future, because he's like, yeah, I see myself being around for a while. And to get married to somebody is to say, yeah, I reckon we'd have a good go of this for a good 30, 40, 50 years. And then you start to see the benefits of that long term. Then you pay off your house, so you have happy memories in the house, so you have happy memories as a married couple, you know, all of those things. You have a successful business. And all of those decisions are made from the basis that the more you act out the proposition that life is good, the better it gets. Because if you're assuming that life is going to get worse, then why would you do any of those things to begin with? And I thought that was, when you were speaking about the best is yet to come, I kept thinking back to that line, because I was like, they're sort of congruent.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a tricky one. Probably the only debate I've ever seen Jordan Peterson lose, in my mind, quite convincingly, was when he debated the UCT or Stellenbosch professor David Benatar. I don't know if you know Benatar at all.
No, you'll have to share.
So it was on the Renegade Report podcast. There was a live debate between the two. It's really worth looking for. Renegade Report, Jordan Peterson, you'll find it. And David Benatar is an anti-natalist. Are you familiar with the term at all? So his theory is the worst thing we ever did, the most selfish thing we ever did for our children is to have them. His premise is that life is inherently difficult. Life is actually an act of suffering, and it's really, really hard. And then we become aware of our death, and it becomes harder and scarier the closer you get, to the point that you die screaming inside because you're so petrified. And this feels like a really tough value proposition. I know, I do think about it sometimes. I do think, shit, my two children, like this is what I've given them. And the comparison I often give to people is that I think life, most people imagine life, they say they want their kids to be happy. I don't think happiness is a possibility. I think being able to come back to happiness, like getting your breath back again, is important. And being able to know that happiness is always on the horizon, And no matter how hard it feels, happiness is around the corner. I think that's important. The
Yeah.
state of being happy
Hope.
is unrealistic. Yes, hope. I think that the weather forecast, I think the Isle of Man is a better metaphor for happiness than South Africa, in that the Isle of Man is cloudy with a chance of sunshine, whereas South Africa is sunshine with a chance of clouds. I think actually life is inherently difficult, and every now and then we get the chance for happiness, and we've got to recognize those. So, but that said, and this is maybe where I get close to Peterson, but not exact, is that I think optimism is the key and hope is the key. So the idea that as soon as we see life as good, I don't see life as good. I see life as really hard. But I recognize that there's the most wonderful things at the other side of that. And I remember listening to the debate, and Benatar was right that life is a struggle. But I realized, as we've already discussed on the call, is that we choose, most driven humans choose struggle as sport. Right? We choose to do hard things because we recognize that the struggle, the happiness that comes at the other side of an intentional hard thing is way sweeter than the random happiness that happens by accident.
Yeah.
So it's a weird space between the two of them, but I think we need to be hopeful and optimistic in order to achieve great things. And I do always remain optimistic. I was saying to my friend Hugh this morning that I'm nervous in the short term about the world, but I'm positive in the long term. So I'm petrified because I think that, a lot of people are going to find themselves in the washing machine of life at the moment. But in the long term, I think that we'll be better off as a species and as humanity.
Yeah, I think just to clarify and to maybe push back on what you said a little there is, so there's a difference between acting that life is good and acting out the proposition that life is good. So I don't think he's necessarily in that way saying that life is good, and the more you believe, because life is good, then take a longer term stance and the better it gets. He's saying the more you act out the proposition that life is good, not necessarily that it is, then the better it gets. Because then I suppose one might say that then that ties in nicely to the hope, is that there is that hope that life can get better, despite the fact that it might not feel that way now. So in my opinion, it just slightly is a subtle difference, but for me, it's quite important.
I think I think you're right. It's a subtle difference, but I think it's a massively significant subtle difference. Yeah, it's subtle to see, but deeply significant when you process it. And I think you're absolutely right. I think if I think about it, it only takes a relatively small amount of joy and achievement in a day to make a hard day feel amazing. Like, it really doesn't take much. If you had to score, so I score every single day out of 864, every single day. So at the end of every day, when the last thing I put in my little evening notes is I score the day, because it's 86,400 seconds. It's just this arbitrary thing we came up with in an EO group. And it doesn't take much. If I look at a day, no matter how hard the day was, if I just had an incredible family dinner, or we played a cool board game, or we did something rad, or like I had a great time in jiu-jitsu, or I got one sale or something, the day is a win. Like, the day is in the high scoring emojis. And in that reference, then you realize that basically, because life's default state is difficult, we actually give it a relatively low scoring. So we might be existing at a 2 out of 10 because life is difficult a lot of the day, or a 4 out of 10 because life is hard. But the spikes throughout the day, you can get a bunch of 8s and 9s and things. And the net effect of that is that the day was a good day. And if we believe that the majority of our days are good days, then it's easy to make the hypothesis. It's easy to give yourself a reason to believe the premise that life is good. And I just think I'm very logical, so I have to work through it that way. But I think you won me over. I think you're right. Life is hard, but life is good. And those two things can correlate as well.
Yeah, that's the duality of life, going back to the Taoist symbol of yin and yang, order and chaos, and the impermanent nature of life. So that was also what I loved about the year compass as well, is that Enzo symbol, that Japanese Zen Buddhism of a circle that hasn't been completely closed, that's impermanent. And the impermanent and imperfect nature of life is something that I find quite fascinating, which again comes back to the Buddhist belief that life is suffering, right? Which is what we've spoken about earlier. Rich, what is a question that you ask yourself more than any other? This is a bit of a left field one, and take some time to mull it over if you need.
Yeah. Okay. Well, while I'm mulling it over, just so we don't have awkward silence, what made you come up with that question? Because I think it's really great. Or in
Because
fact, while I'm mulling mine over, what is yours?
Oh man, I had a sneaky feeling you were gonna turn this one on me. I was like, "Fuck, I don't know if I should ask him this just in case he does it." He did it. Oh man, yeah. So mine. Okay, I'll be fully transparent. Mine is am I good enough? That's the question that I ask myself more often than any other, and to be perfectly honest, sometimes I can power that in a positive way. Sometimes it drives me as a positive force because it then forces me to do more things that make me reevaluate that question. And sometimes it can feel overwhelming at the same time. So that's definitely me. And I think that's also because of the nature of what I'm doing with the podcast and with trying to grow a gym and that sort of thing. The podcast is still quite novel. So we're 83 episodes in, but it's only been a 2.5-year journey. So I'm learning along the way and so on. And there's always that potential. We come back to the potential. So am I good enough to continue doing the podcast? Am I good enough at what I'm doing? It could also be reframed as how could I get better? Would be probably a more constructive way of looking at it. But for me to answer the question would be that.
Thank you for that. That's quite wonderful. And I'll tell you why. As you were speaking, it was like a gut punch to me because so I've done some psychedelic journeys and things like this. And in the first one I did, I met the version of myself that tells me that I'm not enough. So it's the line that it kept on saying to me is, "You are not enough, failure. You are not enough, failure." And I met the version that holds me down that says, "You're not enough, failure. You're not enough, failure." And here's the difference between you and me. And this is where I'm going to take what you've just said and use it to try and transform my life. Is that you're starting from a question, I'm starting from an answer. So you're asking yourself, am I enough? I'm saying, I'm not enough. And the difference is by constantly asking yourself, are you enough? To the same point, then we got to define, well, what is enough? And it gives us room to constantly look and do this. Whereas I live in a world where a version of me, I don't know when, decades ago, defined that I wasn't enough. And I've just lived in the acceptance of this answer, which means that I spend my life feeling like I'm letting myself down. And whereas if I reframe it, if I take the idea and maybe in my evening reflections once a day, ask myself, am I enough? Or was I enough today? And, some days I'll be honest and say, probably not. And some days I was just enough, and some days I was more than enough. And the idea of reflecting on that every single day, I might realize, shit, I'm enough way more than I'm not enough. And it can reprogram. But because I started from the premise of having already answered the question, it's a really difficult place to operate from, because you operated from the, well, shit, I'm not enough. Now what? And so then you're fighting against yourself. But by framing it as an interesting question, you give yourself control back, I think. So I think it's a really, really wonderful premise. I haven't thought about what my big question is yet.
You can come back to it, but I'll interject there. So that makes me feel a whole lot better, to be quite honest. I've never thought about it like that, of thinking of it as a question versus a statement. And yeah, that's also, it's quite a liberating feeling, just hearing you speak that through and that sort of thing, because it's it can get hectic out there. And I think that's when that's when social media and the likes, we are now comparing ourselves. I hate the quote's so taboo now, but comparison is the thief of joy. Yeah.
So good.
It's good, but people use it all the time. But I suppose that's maybe why it's good.
It's just because it's true, right?
Yeah.
This is what earlier on when we talked about the house. If you're comparing yourself to everybody in Four Ways and you've got the best house in Four Ways, you've won. If you move to Santon, you've got the worst house in Santon, you've lost. Even though the house in Santon is better than the house in Four Ways, for argument's sake.
Yeah.
Comparison is the thief of joy. So you've got to defy comparison. Yeah.
Exactly. But then now we're in a world where you can compare yourself to the top 10 people in everything, everywhere, all the time, let alone the people who are posting the highlight reels of their life, not the bloopers reels.
Right. So I realized that. I got very jealous of a friend of mine who's another speaker. I realized at one stage that I was measuring a single criteria of a single thing about his life that he chose to show, and then basing my entire premise on that. All I had to do to step away is to ask myself, would I take my life, would I take his life wholesale and swap it for mine? And the answer was categorically no. There's no chance. There's absolutely no way. And when I was reading Isaacson's book, I actually said this on Ezra's show last week. When I was reading Isaacson's book on Elon Musk, I can't reach any conclusion where I don't think that I'm more successful than Elon Musk. There's as a whole, right? As the whole of being a good full human, living the life towards my purpose, being a good father, good parent, good thing, good stuff like this. I have a life where I choose. I get to exist in complete. I choose my hobbies, I choose my passions. My children like me. My wife and I giggle and laugh and we're close every single day. And there's one area where I'm, a failure compared to Elon Musk, and that would maybe be on my goals for my career. But shit, it's like one sphere, and I'm not saying they're not way more successful people than me wholly. I'm saying somebody like him who's so over-indexed in one area, the idea that I could see him as being more successful than me, because there's not a chance that I would trade his life. Not a chance. His children, he's got 10 children, a bunch of them hate him, some don't want to speak to him. He's got a whole bunch of exes that he has in different relationships with. He seems like he's in a permanent state of anxiety. He thinks the whole world is up against him. And I think even he feels as his potential gap is as big as mine. And because it's always a character, all of our potential gaps is as big as our own. And the problem is, I think he lives a life of potential. Maybe intent. Maybe Mars will be enough, but I don't get it. I don't think he'll be sitting on Mars at the end of his life feeling like he achieved what he wanted to achieve.
At what point does it become about status rather than finance?
All life is about status, right? Everything is status. Finance is just the vehicle for status that matters at the moment. So way back when it was military prowess or your skills as a hunter, then it was military prowess. Then now in this capitalistic era we live in, it's finance. And I think capitalism will be measured. Historians will look back at it and they'll call this the dark age, the light age. This would probably be the accelerated age. So capitalism came in and its entire purpose was to accelerate people to post-capitalistic society, to a society where we no longer require that. And the challenge will be finding what the future of status will be. Because the one thing about humans is humans require status. You're measuring your podcast success based on other podcast successes, and maybe not against Joe Rogan, but maybe against somebody who's like you, but a bit further ahead, which I think is always a better yardstick. But I think it's always been about status. I think at the moment, status is simply the marker for status is wealth. But again, you can change that quickly. You could have a bricklayer and a banker, a poor bricklayer and a wealthy banker going to the golf course. And in the golf course, the bricklayer is a 1 handicap and the banker is a 12. And the banker in that context will always defer to the bricklayer. So status can shift. But generally speaking, for the most part, in our world at the moment, one of the biggest, easiest markers that's available to most of us of status is wealth. The other is fame and following. And wealth, fame, and following often go hand in hand.
You made a lovely video about watching the person from across the river and wanting what they have, and then not paying attention to the stepping stones that are required to get you to across the river. And again, I thought that was such a nice way of putting it into small actionable steps. So Chris Williamson, again, he made mention of this. When you are on the journey to something that you've aimed at and that you're aiming at, it's no good asking somebody who's there already, what are they doing currently? You have to ask them, what did they do when they were where you're at now to get to where they were? And so then you might dial that back a second notch and then say, okay, well, who is the person who's on the next stepping stone?
Yeah.
Let me pay attention to what they're doing rather than let me pay attention to the OG, you know?
And listen, I always think that's a better approach, because when everybody romanticizes their history and their journey. And the further away you are from it, the more constructive the memory of the path to get there. And I've never heard a person.
I love that.
Yeah, totally. And I've never heard, people ask me about the origin story of Missing Link. I tell them a story about a specific event where I saw one thing and this happened. And then I realized I was solving the wrong problem. And then we went in. And of course, that's part of the truth. But the truth is way, 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 way messier. And for a lot of the reason, you arrive where you arrive is luck. But like if you ask Simon Sinek, because I think the example I used in the video, if you asked him, how did you grow yourself as a speaker? He would never say, well, I got really lucky that my TED Talk took off. Okay, and that's not an insult. That's amazing that it happened for him. And it was a really good TED Talk. And he named it well, and he did all the right things to give himself a more surface area for luck. But the truth was that he got really lucky. The algorithm chose him that day. And, maybe the algorithm could have chosen me or something else, and our lives could have been swapped. And so to learn from somebody who came there is difficult. The other reason it's difficult is that they came there in a time that is different to when you're doing it. So even if we do recognize that, say, Simon Sinek wasn't just luck, that it was, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say there was a lot of effort that went into that luck, which I'm sure there was, right? Like he was very good on that TEDx stage that day. But even if we do that, the world of 2014, when he gave that speech, is very, very different to the world of 2026, when my students in our speaking program are trying to give theirs. And the rules in which they operate, the sheer abundance of content and information that's out there is so far different that I'm not sure Simon would have been as possible if Simon did what he did this exactly the same way he did it then, and he tried to execute it today, I don't think he would have achieved the same success. That's not to say that he's not smart enough to have figured it out, but so we're always far better off by taking somebody, creating an avatar of this person is standing on the step that I want to be on next, my current victory condition. He is my closest path to victory, where I'm trying to get to. What has he or she done that I can replicate? What are he and she doing today that got them there? That is how to act when you are there, so I can replicate that, so I can get there sooner.
Fantastic. Rich, we're at an hour. How are you placed for time?
I'm good? Super chill. My next appointment is at 11 my time, which is an hour from now. So.
Oh, dude. Okay, cool. I'm having so much fun. Can we keep going?
No, let's go. I'm super chilled.
Lekker. So you spoke about psychedelics earlier.
My back's getting sore. I did a jiu-jitsu roll last night and this morning, so I'm gonna. It's not good.
You want to lower down? Yeah, that's cool, man.
Cool.
That's cool.
You always have to kind of go.
Yeah, I was like, what, is that your back doing that as you're going down, that noise?
Yeah.
You spoke about psychedelics earlier, dude, and I've been so curious about that. So I tried microdosing on psilocybin, and to be honest, I didn't feel any difference. I'll give it a bash again at some stage. But did you do the full blown psilocybin retreat, and how did you find it? Are you cool with chatting about it?
100%. Very, very, very cool chatting about it. In fact, because I think it's a really important discussion to have. So for context, I'm what you call in the punk rock community straight edge. So I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't take drugs, I'm a vegan. Like it's an entire movement around being out of the system and things like this. And I don't think I became straight edge because it was that was necessarily it. Things happened kind of slowly. But since I stopped drinking at 19. I stopped smoking weed, which was only occasional, maybe 20, 21. And I say I don't take drugs, but I don't recognize my taking of psychedelics for the purpose that I'm taking them for as a drug per se. It's not recreational. And maybe I have to say I don't take recreational drugs anymore. But so I was very wary. I was curious about it. A lot of smart people who I recognize are smart have spoken about its value. So I thought, let me try it. So with my 864 forum, the group I mentioned earlier in the EO, we decided to do one together. So we were in Montreal. We got this amazing guide. She came out, and it was just unbelievable. So she would perform music to us, have these like smokes, this full sensory experience. I took 2.5 grams, which is not a hero dose, but it was a good dose. So microdosing, generally you're doing about maybe 200 milligrams, or maybe a double might be 400, right? So it was 10 times what you did. And the way I've found to explain it to myself, which makes sense to me, because is that it's kind of like a lift, right? So if you imagine that we exist here, and what we're trying to do is get deeper inside our brain. So that's all we're trying to do is I'm not spiritual in that sense. I don't see anything about the universe beyond what's going on inside my head. And I think my head is interesting enough that I don't need anything beyond that to explore. But what happens is at 2.5, let's say every gram you takes you to a different floor in your basement, and takes you deeper into your basement. So that kind of 2.5, I got to the version where I was able to meet this version of myself that just said to me the whole time, "You're not enough, failure. You're not enough, failure. You're not enough, failure." And it was really gnarly and really difficult. And I reflected on it so much. I journaled a lot. I really thought about it, and I came to terms with the fact that this thing exists. It's trying to protect me from some things. I think it was trying to protect me from my youthful arrogance, my belief when I was in my 20s that my shit don't stink and stuff like this. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but I recognize that it's probably some sort of protection that's there. So, but my wife was very jealous that I'd done it, and she wanted to do one. And a year later, we decided to do one together. This time I went up to 4 grams, and my hope was to meet that person and tell them that it's okay, thank you, I appreciate what you're doing, but I don't need you anymore. Like you've done your job. It's not necessarily you can retire happy. But of course, these things don't work that way. And I feel like I kind of briefly saw that floor on my way past, and then I went down into much deeper shit, and things got real. And that was a way, 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 way harder one. That one at one stage, I thought, oh, I died. At one stage, then I thought, oh wait, I'm potentially in hell. And it wasn't like scary demons and stuff. It was a loop, which apparently people talk about a lot. So I got stuck in this cycle where I was just existing in the same moment over and over and over again, like these 3 or 4 scenes. And I thought, oh, hell, I'm in hell. I'm going to repeat this for the rest of time. That's what I'm going to do. And then at one stage, I got to the point where I thought, I've never actually existed whatsoever. Everything was a simulation up until this point, and all I am is this loop, and everything else has been invented. And then I kind of got through the whole thing, and I was able to process on what it meant and how it meant and why it was significant. And actually, that one turned out to be one of the most transformative, significant experiences. It really, really helped my wife and I. I mean, we were already good, but it made us even better. And I understood my role in our marriage better, what I'm supposed to do and achieve. And so I found it to be very transformative. The one thing I'm wary about all of these things, though, is that, and I think I recognize that it can help people who are very depressive or things like that, beat depression and things like that. Like the data is quite staggering, but I don't think it's a be all and end all. And the reason I say this is I've got friends who've done it, 20, 30 ayahuascas or whatever, and they're still fucked up. And they still seem to have the same insecurities to me. So if that is the case, then it can help you solve elements of us, but we're so deeply, deeply, deeply complex. And that I don't think it's a quick fix for anything, but I think it's a very worthwhile experience to go into with a very specific mindset of what you're trying to work on. Like if you went in and asked yourself the question, am I enough? It would be quite interesting.
Sure. Yeah, that is something, hey? So I guess going back to the victory condition, right? So you go and you have this thing and you do this thing of a retreat of some kind, psilocybin, and to have your victory condition predetermined, this is what I'm going in there for and this is what I'm looking to achieve and get out of it. So
yeah, that's what that's in setting. Set is the mindset you go in with, and setting is the environment that you're doing it in. So by spending some time working on the mindset you go in with, setting the victory condition and the intention, and it's not going to tell you exactly what you think. The second time, what I got from it, I thought was so counter to what I thought I'd asked for, but because I was actually nervous being there with my wife, like, what if I blurted out something wrong or things, or because that was in my frame, it helped me address completely different issues that ended up making my marriage better, even though what I went in for was trying to meet this dude again. So you can tell it what your setting is, but your brain gets the final vote.
Yeah, that's insane. Holy smokes. You going back to missing link. Something I often wondered with people, I mean, you mentioned, I think, 29-year career with Missing Link. How long has it been?
That's 1997, so 28 years this year.
28 years this year. Is the reason you're in business now the same reason that you started Missing Link?
Yes. Because it's not romantic. Cool. Well, it's not romantic. You see, again, so the reason I started Missing Link, so I do believe that, and maybe later on this changes, but when you start your first company, I was 22 years old. I started a company because I thought, I can make money doing this. There was no this idea of my higher purpose being helping people stand on the stage and present better. I could give a shit. These guys are corporates. They've got a lot of money and they'll pay me in this thing. And this seems to be a niche that I can own. Later on, that became something of more purpose. And now I get tremendous, nothing fills my tank more, nothing, than standing on the side of a stage, watching a speaker we work with deliver the talk of their life. Like I get emotional, I want to cry. Like I feel deeply emotionally connected to them sharing. We're working with 10 speakers at the moment that are telling really, really, really gnarly stories about their life. Like they were chosen out of like thousands. They're all heavy. And we're flying down to Sydney to do some last minute coaching with them. I know that I'm going to be finished watching each of them speak, but I know that I've got a talk in New Zealand like the next day, and I know I'm going to walk into that talk floating by the sheer amazingness of this. But the reason Missing Link existed was to make money, to allow us to grow, and to have a good life. And that's why it still exists. That's the reason companies exist, is because we want to make money, control our own destiny, and be able to look after the people around us. Everything else is something that comes later. And I think that's okay. I think that's really wonderful. So the what we sold at Missing Link at the beginning versus what we sell now is changed. But here's the other problem with going in and pretending that this purpose thing, even in business, is that important, is that if I hang on to the purpose the Missing Link had, that we came up with a purpose statement for Missing Link 5 years ago, if I hang on to that purpose strongly today, we'll be out of business. And in fact, part of the reason our business is struggling at the moment, because and I think any service company that does what we do would be struggling, is because the world is changing faster than our ability to change in it. And we need to figure out how to make ourselves relevant going forward in that regard. And part of doing that is letting go of the problem that I was solving before, our previous purpose, and trying to solve a more meaningful problem that we're appropriate to going forward.
So,
but the equipment is make more money than you spend. That's
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So something they are talking about the speakers. I have you ever been so happy for somebody else's success when you look at them and you're like, wow, seeing that person being successful makes me happy?
Yeah,
Sounds like an
many,
obvious
many, many.
question. Yeah, exactly. So then, therefore, if that's the case, is it just their success?
No,
It's
absolutely.
not. It's
Well, yes and no. It depends how far removed you are from it.
mm,
But like my wife's success as an artist, I have no part to play other than sometimes me being a shit becomes the her muse for creativity for
the
because
create.
you're like
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
working with a speaker, you're right. If I'm working with a speaker and the speaker gets on stage and delivers an incredible talk, that is deeply fulfilling to me. It's a massive win for me. In fact, it probably feels like a bigger win for me. I definitely generate more pride from more lasting warmth from watching somebody get off a stage that's done so well than for me getting off a stage having done well. Although I love that feeling. That feeling is like cocaine. It's like the best thing
Yeah.
in the world. I've never had cocaine, but it's
Yeah.
like the best endorphin thing that I experience.
Yeah. Booger sugar.
Yeah, booger sugar. I've never heard that term. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
that's a winner, booger sugar. Dude, what about relentless relevance? So you mentioned the word relevant earlier and the importance of staying relevant. So in 2026, we all know how crazy things are moving and how quickly things are changing. How important is it to stay relevant in this age that we find ourselves in?
Look, um, I think it was always important. I think it's harder now. So, and I think that if you're in a very comfortable position in a large corporation and you do your job and your job is, whatever, it just kind of gets done. I think you were safe. I just don't think that's the case anymore. I think that relevance, the definition that I really love is the state of being appropriate to the matter at hand. So I am relevant when I am useful. And one of my biggest, my victory condition of life, like my true victory condition is I've kind of got two parts to it. I want to die useful, having figured out what my core philosophy is. Like if I can die while still being useful, if I can extend the usefulness of my life as far as possible, and then when I die, have distilled everything that I thought about to just the smallest amount of very important things, I think that would be a massive win. But
Wow.
in the world we live in today, in 2026, our usefulness is under attack. So I was useful because I could do one thing. Our missing link was useful, for example, because we could help people generate really nice slides that they couldn't generate themselves. Well, now that's not even a problem. That's nonsensical. Everyone's able to generate really, really beautiful, remarkable slides. They might not have the same surprise and delight, but the satisfactory level of them is high. So the problem that we were solving as a business is no longer important. Therefore, we are no longer relevant. What we have to do is one of two things: either find out what the world cares about. So in our space, that might be storytelling and become appropriate to that. Or this is the harder thing, but I think it often gains better results if you win, is let them realize that there is a different problem they've not focused on and own that space. So show them the dragon and then solve that. I think that has always been our approach. I think that at the moment, with the way the world is changing as fast as possible, the easier thing is the approach that will save us, which is find what people do care about and help them solve it. That is the easiest focal point for anybody in the world today. Be the solution to the problem that people have.
Yeah. Bringing it back to when we were talking about mental wellness. When I read your book, and I thought it was great, and I love the way that you frame relevance. But for me, being in the wellness space, I saw that as being irrelevance being another word for loneliness. And if you are appropriate to the matter at hand, that could take many shapes. That could be father, husband, expert speaker, founder of a business, personal trainer, podcaster. Yet, if there is nothing in a person's life where they are appropriate to a matter at hand, then that thereby would be the definition of loneliness. And I think to be irrelevant would therefore mean to be lonely. And then, of course, you can take that back to mental wellness. And for example, Brené Brown has a wonderful book called The Atlas of the Heart, and she unpacks the different emotions and really defines them categorically, which is exactly that. It's an atlas. It allows you to navigate through your emotions more successfully so that you can make sense of the shit that's going on up here and in here in the heart. And she gave a wonderful stat about loneliness, that loneliness shortens a person's life by more than alcohol, more than air pollution, more than smoking, and the last one was obesity, being overweight. It reduces a person's life, and I can attach that in the show notes for people who want to go and check out the link. But I mean, that blew my socks off, man. I've referenced that a few times, which is why I know it, because like I just keep coming back to it. I'm like, holy smokes, loneliness is a silent killer. It's fucking bonkers.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And this is why I say about dying useful, right? Because you cannot simultaneously be useful and lonely. By very virtue of the fact that you are being useful to somebody. If I'm an 85-year-old man and I feel that I have wisdom to share with my grandkids, and that I'm able to go on walks and entertain them and help look after them, and you know, I don't know, whatever, any small little thing. If I'm useful to somebody, therefore, it's very difficult to be lonely and useful, because you have human interaction. And that's what you want to be, as I think you want to be useful to the other humans, right? That's the only yardstick we have. I do think that maybe looking after an animal, or, there's probably elements of that that would work for certain people. But I think you're spot on. I would just say that we have a much more punch in the face relevance problem to face in terms of our careers, in that if you want to pay the bills, you've got to be solving the problem that people have, and they've got to feel like you're a better option for them. So during COVID, in your space, you would have had the problem of how you solve problem in the fitness space would have been very, very different to the problem of how you solved it before COVID. The matter at hand had shifted, and you had to become appropriate to the new matter at hand. So there, I think that the loneliness thing is, I mean, if you have no clients, it's a very lonely place. So maybe just go through it completely.
Yeah. So here's something that I've been thinking about. Do you think it's more important to capture people's attention in person or online?
From a presenting point of view, we've got kind of like a line on this, is that in a live presentation, so I'm saying on stage, I've got to catch your attention. I've got to hold your attention. Whereas online, I have to interrupt your distraction. So people are listening to this now, they're in their cars, they're driving, or they're watching this, and it's open in a tab, and maybe they've gone to a different tab. There's very, very few people that watch an entire episode of Joe Rogan like a movie. Like at one stage, they might be listening in the car. At one stage, it might be down at the side here while they're on another tab doing their email. And every now and then, the guest will say something like, holy fucking shit. And then they've got to go back and they've got to go on there. So I think that in a live audience, I can capture attention and then hold it for a while. Online, I've got to interrupt your distraction. I do think about, and I'm wondering if that's a bad answer to your question. Maybe I took the question the wrong way. I think that in order to be able to, you can reach more people online. And so depending on what you want from your life, for me, I would like to achieve, I think part of the reason I think I'm a failure is I think that I've got ideas that I would like to share with a wider audience, and I would like to have more access to that audience. And if I can achieve that, it'd be great. And the path to do that at scale is generally online.
Mm. Yeah. You answered the question. I mean, but so for me, it's a question of, okay, well, is it more valuable to capture a person's attention face to face, an individual, and have that interaction with them and experience something that might be profound and meaningful, and a conversation that can be shared, and there's a ripple effect to that, versus then having the more scalable option, which would be make a video about something that might be profound, or have a conversation with somebody online that might be profound, that is then scalable, that everybody can listen to all the time. And I was wondering about those two, and which one would be more of a priority for me.
Okay, so I'll answer for me, and I'd love to hear where you land.
Yeah.
So I'm letting you know I'm going to throw it back.
Yeah.
For me, I think that the source material for everything I share online happens in real life. Right? There's very rare, and let's take what we're doing now. This is not what I would call an online experience. This is a real life experience that happens like as we're physically recording this. Right? We're just two humans having a great conversation. The fact that it will exist online later, that's different. But right now, your whole premise that you shared with me about asking the question, right? So that has significant impact to me. That is a real life experience that I might later on turn into content, or we are turning into content at the moment, and that might spread. But almost everything I talk about, if I think about it when I'm on stage or on a podcast, is an experience I had in real life with actual humans that is the basis for which. So online is the amplification, but real life is the creation, I think. Let me throw it back to you.
So for me, I'm about the face to face, the in person, the energy, the body language, the whole thing. That for me personally is what might give me the most reward, what I might find the most fulfilling. And I then, because that's the way that I'm, I guess, wired, because I'm in the industry of self-improvement and wanting people to achieve and to be the best versions of themselves and so on, that I then, and then you contrast that with something like social media and producing content, which is extremely valuable. And I'm not saying, because I've got a lot of really great stuff. I said in the beginning with you, from listening to your stuff and other people. But then I think to myself, well, is the way that we're communicating, is this the beginning of the end of how we know communication as we have known in this era? And I don't have the answer to that, but it's just something that I've been pondering. Is this the beginning of the end as far as communication with a human as we know it?
I think it is. I think we've got to separate communication into different spheres. So I think it is the beginning of the end. I really do believe, in the book, I put forward a hypothesis that we're going to get to a state of brain-computer interface, allowing us to connect with network source and at a much higher bit rate. So I'm at like 37 bits per second communicating with you at the moment. Imagine what would happen if I could communicate at gigabits per second. And imagine if I'm communicating to your brain at gigabits per second. So imagine the podcast of the future is somebody being able to tune into somebody's pictures of their brain, and they're sending entire thoughts or information that can be processed quickly at the receiver. And I do imagine that we'll figure out some degree of communication at that level that we haven't thought through, that will appear like telekinesis or something. Not telekinesis, that's moving shit, but will appear like mind reading when we get there.
Telepathy.
Yeah, like telepathy. And but I really do believe, and I do believe this, and people push back and argue with me on this. I believe that human communication, the voice stuff, will still matter, and that we will, you'll come home from a day at the office where you've been communicating big ideas with your clients in high resolution thoughts, and you'll be really, really excited to sit down with your partner and just actually open your mouth and have this lo-fi communication form. And I think we'll save it. We'll recognize the luxury of inefficient communication. And I think it'll be quite wonderful. And the kind of proof point for this that I constantly see is that no matter how efficient, better the reach of online events was in 2020, nobody prefers it. I sometimes like them from an efficiency of a message. I can watch them the next day, but it's just video content. The in-person events are still where magic happens. And it's because the event is a catalyst for conversation. The conversation is how we meet people and the connections get made. And so I'm really gung-ho on the fact that even if communication changes dramatically from where it is, we'll always find our way back home to conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, for me, that's quite comforting as somebody that enjoys the human element to it. Rich, where can people find you if they want to get in touch? I mean, hopefully this is, I've paid enough lip service to how much I've enjoyed your stuff, but where can other people find you, LinkedIn and the likes?
Yeah, I'd definitely say the first place to look would be LinkedIn, because it's definitely the platform I'm engaged with the most. It's the one I enjoy the most. I find it's got the lowest propensity for assholes. And actually, it's really good. Yeah, it's a good medium to share stuff in context. So definitely say there. My website, you can go to getrich.af, and that will just take you to richmulholland.com, and people can engage with me there as well. Reach out to me, contact me via that. But generally, the easiest way and the way that most people engage and contact with me is through LinkedIn. And I will say that for those who want to, I think if you go to getrich.af/newsletter, I think that works. Is I send out a very irregular newsletter that shares my thoughts and my ideas and maybe tools I'm using and things I'm enjoying. And I really enjoy writing that. So I hope people enjoy receiving it.
Nice, dude. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat to you as far as the email newsletter is concerned. When I get into the groove of sending those email newsletters, I really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite parts of my week, but it's just not something that I've done consistently enough, to be fair. So
my biggest feeling, without a doubt, is my lack of consistency at almost anything promotional.
Yeah, it's the same for me. I find it so frustrating, and I really want to just outsource it. But yeah, I fully resonate with that, man.
I want to outsource it. I want it to be authentic. So I don't want to outsource it because I want it to be for me. So it's such a catch-22.
It is, dude. It is. I love that line with LinkedIn. They should use that as a slogan, as the social media platform that has the lowest propensity for assholes.
Yeah, it really does. It just doesn't seem to. I mean, you get some people trolling, but because it's a professional network, it's generally, I don't know. People are generally just nicer, and they engage. Man. Yeah.
Nice, dude. Well, listen, thanks so much for your time. I know it's been an episode that I've looked forward to for quite some time. You were on my, I would call it like a dream big guest list, probably about a year ago. I first came across you on a Get Smarter public speaking program with Bruce Whitfield. And then I was like, man, I'd love to have this dude on the show. And you build it up and you think, I wonder what the conversation is going to be like. Sometimes it's better than you think. Sometimes it's worse. But I can comfortably say fully lived up to my expectations, which I had high expectations. So that is a tremendous compliment to you. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you for the time that we've been able to spend together today.
And if I can throw back to gratitude, you clearly did a lot of work in watching, preparing, going through stuff, and it really showed in the quality of the questions and the conversation. So thank you for, I know you like it to be free-flowing and just kind of move that way, but you gave yourself freedom and a framework, and I think it worked really, really well, and it showed. So thanks for that. And thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much.
Rich. Hey everyone, a huge amount of work and effort goes into producing this podcast, whether it's from the research going into the episode, whether it's finding the guests coming to the location or them being online, to producing the content, edited and putting it in a format that is conducive to your ears and your eyes. And it goes a really, really long way if you can just do me one thing in return for this free content: share it. Share it far and wide, and if you find an episode useful, send it to someone who might feel the same way. That's all. Thanks a million. See you next week.